Good evening and welcome to Hello, It's Us, a program based on the premise that life in general goes better if it's you, me, and them working together as opposed to everyone working at cross purposes. Hello, It's Us is brought to you by a collaboration between the Center for Disabilities and Development, the Extend a Dream Foundation, and all the folks here at Public Access Television, Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham. This is my co-host, Keith Ruff. And tonight we're going to continue with the conversation of the importance of friends and family in folks with disabilities succeeding in life.
I believe we left off last time when we were talking about college life.
Yeah, we had started with that. And I guess one thing I wanted to backtrack a little on.
Okay.
One of the most important things I found going through the rehab process after having an accident was that there are certain responses you kind of expect from your family that, they're not going to probably talk about how bad things could be, and are more than likely to paint a little rosier picture, and that's what you kind of expect. And so I tended to take a lot of my cues about how things were going and how folks were accepting the changes in my life by how different friends would act. And, I had gone to school from kindergarten through high school with a certain group of people, Catholic school from kindergarten to 11th grade, and, so I had an established group of people who I had known for 13 years, and was able to tell very quickly which of those folks were able to handle the whole situation and which of those folks very quickly kind of dropped off the scene.
With as a family member, you kind of expect them to be there anyway.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to look and see how that worked with other people's families, and saw it did and didn't. And during that first year of rehab, it came to get a lot of my sense of self-worth and my sense of, well, yeah, things are going to work out one way or another, from a gal who I had known when I worked at Hy-Vee, in that she and her dad were in routinely, and she knew a couple people that I did, and we knew each other, but didn't know each other really well. And she and her dad began to come down and visit, and I was 50 miles away from home in a hospital. And we got very, very close, and basically dated off and on for that year. Dated off and on. Yeah, I was in the hospital for 13 months, but for that
Yeah.
period of time, she was a routine visitor, and we got close enough to know that there were going to be people out there who I would meet who hadn't known me before the accident and would be able to make connections with. And, that was very important during that time. That relationship changed, and we didn't see each other for 20 years, and then started seeing each other again for a few years, and then it just went back to being friends, and, but I think those needing somebody out of that comfort circle
Yeah,
to say, yes, life's gonna go on, not sure how, not sure what it's gonna be, but you are still of value.
yeah,
You are in a position to change things and, to be productive and successful.
but without that relationship, neither of us would know that.
Exactly.
You gotta get out of your comfort zone.
Uh-huh. And a lot of the people who went through the rehab center didn't have that, and ended up being the folks who might have gone off to college for 1 year, but nobody told them they had to make certain grades to stay in college, and kind of found lives afterwards, and either in nursing homes or with people they met in that, but settled into that public assistance comfort zone.
Yeah, the same old rut.
Yeah. So then, moving on to college, well, that was a whole, new gamut of people you were going to meet, and a whole gamut of different circumstances, and it was 20 years before the ADA, so stuff wasn't physically accessible, and you had to find people to provide personal care for you. Initially I was
Yeah.
going to go to Mount Mercy in Cedar Rapids and was going to live in a nursing home because there was another guy I knew who had come back for checkups at the hospital who was going to Mount Mercy and living in the nursing home. And I thought, well, at least I'll know one person there. And 3 weeks before classes were supposed to start, they got hold of me and said, yeah, sorry, no, can't do that. So ended up going and checking out a school that somebody else I was in the hospital with knew, and recruiting somebody to go with me, and so it went from there. And began to deal with what life was going to be in a world that physically wasn't welcoming to me. Because for that first year, I wasn't out and about all that much. So I didn't have the experience of getting to a corner and, son of a gun, there weren't curb cuts at any of the corners.
Yeah.
Or only one of the four corners had curb cuts, and it was like, okay, what good is this going to do me? Or, doors that were too narrow, or doors that didn't have lever action handles. Fortunately, the college was only 5 years old at the time, so it had elevators so you could get up and down, and all of the buildings were connected, so you didn't have to constantly go outside. So that was okay, but dorm rooms were not necessarily real accessible. The desks or wall desks in them, were mounted at a certain level. The restrooms didn't have showers that were accessible. They had ledges that, you would have to have a chair lifted up and over. They had ramps on the end of the buildings that were nowhere close to what would later be determined to be an accessible ramp.
It sounds just like the day I left the rehab unit. I went right to college, and that was quite a day.
Yeah. And I mean, if yours was anything like mine, you get there and, there's the mad dash to get your stuff unloaded and
Yeah,
into your dorm
yeah.
room. And, my dad and brother wanted to get the hell out of Minnesota and back to Iowa. And by the time that things are loaded and they're heading down the road and you're sitting there looking at the stacks that are now your room thinking, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. And
And-
I had just got my very first power chair that same day.
Yeah. I had gotten a power chair only because therapists convinced my parents I'd never be able to do college without a power chair. Well, that particular power chair was the end of the run for that type chair. And shortly after that, they came out with a new version. So I think I got the original lemon. And of 4 years in college, I think I probably only used it for 2 weeks because something was always breaking on it. I had a motor break on it once that we put another motor on it that when I would try to go someplace, it sounded like a bicycle that you'd put a card in the spokes to pretend you sounded like a motorcycle or something. And so I actually got along with a manual chair most of the time. But, and even though they had a rehab department who would help you with some of these things, you still had to work out how you were going to get notes, if you could take notes well enough yourself, or if you knew somebody who could take notes for you. There was a lot of classes where I had a lot of carbon paper and other paper,
I
would have somebody else do their notes that way, and I would have them, or would have a friend who was doing it, or whether you were going to need assistance in a test.
A lot of people that did that for me, they turned around at the end of the year and said thank you, because they knew they had to take good notes because they were taking it with somebody else.
That was really kind of an interesting side effect, that they would say things like, if I'd have been taking them for myself, I wouldn't have paid nearly as much attention, and I got a grade a full level better than what I figured I would have. And it's like, well, thanks, that works fine. But that then, and they would said that in front of other people who would go, what, you did who, what now? And they would explain, what they had done.
Yeah.
And people would go, I never thought of that. Do people with disabilities frequently need help in a class or whatever? Well, it just depends.
You can't write it.
How would I go about finding out?
Yeah.
Well, go over and talk to them. What do you mean? Said, go over, introduce yourself. Say, you're aware some people with disabilities need assistance with notes or anything. Is there any assistance you can be? It's that simple? Yeah. And they'll either say yes or no.
Right.
So yeah, I made a lot of friends in classes that way.
And I carried that over to this school, in the grad school.
Sure.
And it worked out well.
Uh-huh. And as you find those ways to do things, it gets easier and easier.
Yeah.
Because, when I got hurt, I was 18 years old, senior in high school. Thought I knew everything, thought I was bulletproof. And was not comfortable asking people for help. That was, as I say, being the male 18-year-old, that wasn't what you did. You just figured out yourself, da-da-da-da-da. So, asking people to open doors or to pick something up I dropped or that kind of thing. Even when I was in the rehab center, was really something that I found difficult to do. And my God, the things that I'll ask people to do now are, I would have had a heart attack thinking I would have done it back then. But
Yeah.
you learn how to do that, which in turn lets the people without disabilities into your world a little
Yeah.
and learn, about you, about people with disabilities, and it just makes things better.
And it felt like a whole educating process without you educating because they're learning as they go along.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many things that people who want to be helpful, and because you find it embarrassing or whatever to ask somebody else how you help them. I mean, I had instances of good help gone very, very wrong. I was wheeling back to the dorm after class one night and it was starting to sprinkle, and some guy came running up in back of me and decided he was going to help me without acknowledging it to me. So he hit the chair going full blast, not realizing that I was a fairly big guy, and ended up tipping me over, him going head over heels over the top of me, and us basically laying on the ground looking at each other going, okay, what the hell do we do now? And figuring out how he was going to get me back in the chair
Yeah.
without
And
having to take off and find help.
Okay.
And his first statement, once I was finally back in the chair and settled and it was clear I wasn't injured, was, guess I should have asked you first, huh? That was a bit of a shocking way. Another time I had gone to downtown Marshall, Minnesota, and was going to go to the bank. So I had parked, and I was headed down the street to get to my bank. And this little old lady came up to me who had to have been 65 or 70 years old and said, I'll help, and started pushing. And I mean, I don't think she was making a difference really, but she thought she was.
Yeah.
And we got to a corner, and I said, well, thanks, this is where I turn. And she said, no, I'm going another block. And we went down another block, and she said, okay, this is my corner, and off she went. And I had to turn around and go back up the street to get to the corner I wanted to. But
Yeah.
she had this proud, happy little
Yeah.
look on her face,
Yeah.
like, I did a good thing today. So,
And
if,
you didn't want to ruin that.
no, we were both raised that you're nice to older folks.
Yeah.
So that one went okay, and you learn that, but different professors had different ways to come across with people, and different students, and each part of the university had different ways of accommodating. And because there were several hundred of us with varying kinds of disabilities there, and they really had wanted and had built the school thinking it was going to be accessible, but having no blueprint or no guidelines as to how you built something physically accessible. They called upon some of us, the big mouths basically, who weren't
Yeah.
afraid to complain,
Yeah.
to help them do that kind of stuff. Here's a committee. We want to look at making this work better. So they involved us. And of course, as with every good committee search, once you identify people who will be on a committee, you go to them until they finally say, leave me alone. So, I was on a number of committees, and, with college, you have people rotating through. So there was that whole part of the education process, and, getting door handles switched to lever action, and getting showers so that they were roll in,
And just little ramps from the parking lot up to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I help with.
and a lot of those were already there.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't call them ramps. I mean, the dorm I first lived in at school was right across the street from the religious center.
Okay.
So in front of the dorm was the cutout to get across the street to the religious center. Now, you had to go across the street and down a half a block to the parking lot before you had another way to get in on the other side. But, they knew they had to do something.
Yeah.
Or, accommodations for phys ed classes, or, a variety of other things that now they have whole departments in schools to help with. That, back then, we all kind of stumbled through together to make getting an education possible.
With my phys class, all I had to take is physical therapy, and I went through it.
Yeah. Well, we had that option too, unless the physical therapist determined that you really had the ability to do something a little more than that.
Yeah.
So I actually started in an archery class one semester, and we messed around and figured out how to literally tape the bow to my hand and to melt the little end on the arrow so it wouldn't fall off the string. And then somebody would have to, because I was using a manual chair then, would have to push me down to the gymnasium where they had the archery class.
Okay.
And it was just crazy. And one day, I was sitting there getting ready to shoot, and the instructor walked in front of me, wasn't paying any attention to me, and stopped in front of me to talk to somebody beside her. Now, the person beside her looked and realized what was going on, and her plate became like saucers. And I'm sitting there with my arm jiggling and ready to let go of the string, and shouted something very nasty at her to get her attention. And she leapt out of the way, and I let go of the bowstring, or got it off my fingers, and shot a bullseye.
Yeah.
Well, I dropped the class after that. That was just way too much drama for me, but oh my God. And we played, bocce ball indoors. There was all kinds of table tennis now. So we could do a lot of those different things, and got to know some of the professors. And bocce ball is, Italian lawn bowling.
Yeah.
Well, the rehab department got that set in the middle of winter in Marshall, Minnesota. Well, as any kids with a new present, we didn't want to wait till it was nice to go out. So we went over to the gymnasium, and there was there was a track around the gym itself that had AstroTurf on it. And we started playing there. And a couple of the assistant coaches heard this noise that was being made by the wooden balls bouncing against the side walls, came up and wanted to know what we were doing. We showed them, And these two guys fell in love with the game. And so every free minute they had, they would come down to the rehab area to scare somebody up who wanted to play with them and take them back up there. And so we got to know a whole different group of people that way.
Yeah.
And the wheelchair athletes, and we helped put on basketball tournaments and different wheelchair track meets and that kind of stuff. And it really was interesting to get to know the level of people that we did, because it would run from custodians helping move stuff around to university vice presidents. But you got to know people at an entirely different level.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Way.
I think we should have gotten double sets of grades for stuff learned in and outside of the classroom, but, well, once again, we're just burning through time here.
We did.
And I hope folks watching understand the importance of a lot of what we're talking about.
Yes.
And that there was a time when there weren't the laws that said, this is how wide a doorway needs to be, and a ramp needs to be, 1 foot of ramp for every inch of incline, and for every 15 feet of ramp you need a 5-foot square resting area.
And the way public transportation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, in that it wasn't.
Yeah.
And all the things that have happened from that, and the importance of a lot of that, because up until not a long time before the decade of the 70s, folks ended up in special schools and in institutions, and it really was exception to rules if you saw folks with disabilities out with a competitive job in the community, or my God, out by themselves, that.
And Jerry and I have a good insight on both sides of the coin. So it's been a long, long life, but it's been worthwhile, don't you think?
I think so. And I think we probably still have a lot to share.
Yes.
The next few weeks we've got other programs scheduled. Hope you join us for them.
Enjoy
Be back soon.
And if you don't see us for a while, enjoy your holidays. We will.
Take care.
Bye now. Stay warm.